Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and online viewers from around the world, thank you for joining the 2020 Smart City CTalk Online e-governance session. Today, we are honored to involve key players in the field of e-governance from Taiwan, Finland, Poland, Turkey, and Philippines. They will engage in talks with one another regarding how cities stimulate the deployment of smart city technologies and innovate business applications after COVID-19. Please join me to welcome the delegates for today's online CTalk. Mr. Huang Yannan, Distinguished Professor of Research Center for Information Technology Innovation, Academia Sinica, Taiwan.
Hi, everyone.
Mr. Lü Xinke, Commissioner of Department of Information Technology, Taipei City Government, Taiwan. Mr. Kamil Ches, Head of International and Investor Relations, Rzeszów, Poland. Mr. Markus Kuhn, Strategy Director, Helsinki, Finland.
Hi, everyone. Hello.
Dr. Hüseyin Bayraktar, Deputy Director General of Ministry of Environment and Urbanization, Ankara, Turkey.
Hello.
Dr. Malusz Sagan, Head of Strategy and Entrepreneurship Department, Lublin, Poland.
Good afternoon to Asia and good morning to Europe.
Ms. Aurora Aganizal, Director of Program Beneficiaries Development, Davao City, the Philippines.
Hi, good afternoon.
We will now take a virtual group photo of all the meeting delegates to capture this special moment on the camera. Delegates, please look into your camera and smile as we take a screenshot of this video conference. Ready, set, smile. Now, please put your thumb up as we take another group photo. Ready, set, smile. Thank you for joining the group photo shooting. Now, let me invite our moderator today, Professor Huang Yannan from Research Center for Information Technology Innovation, Academia Sinica, to deliver his welcoming remarks. Professor Huang, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. We know the world is changing. Okay, now we have more people in the world. Our resources have become more limited and more polluted. We are in an environment, actually, we do need some digital technology to help to improve our efficiency and also improve our mobility. Now, especially this year, we have a COVID-19. Actually, changed a lot about how we used to live. Now we cannot go out to eat too much, regularly travel. We limited for a lot of lifestyle, and we change from going to more online. Okay, so we definitely need more technologies. And in this particular time, this conference was good for us to exchange ideas about how we can live under this kind of environment to make our life better using digital technology. So definitely we have a number of good talks from different cities in the world, and we'd like to share the experience we have, and hopefully we have a very fruitful discussion later on. Thank you. Okay, so I will introduce the CIO of Taipei City, CIO Lü, to talk about the experience from Taipei.
Okay, thank you, and good afternoon. And my name is Lü Xinke, and I'm the CIO of Taipei. And it's my honor to be here on behalf of the Taipei City for today's CTalk. And on my part, I would like to brief on the digital transformation of Taipei City. To begin with, according to the UN data on the issue of digital transformation, it noted about that digital government is not an end. It's a means to improving the public service and the delivery, and ultimately make life better for all. For us, and we see the transition and from the traditional government, move to the e-government, and even go to the connected government, and help us to move the city in the right direction through the evolutions of the delivery public service. Such progression enables us to transform into the connected government, and which allow us to create an organic ecosystem, providing the interaction between the government and the citizens, and that is putting and the service value for us. Through the digital governments and the city government, hope to integrate all data and systems to realize the core dimensions which lie on the strategy map in Taipei, and with the ultimate goal and to realize our vision of the livable and the sustainable smart city. And that's in this slide is a framework for us to carry out the digital transformation of the city government. When we're talking about a smart city, we were inevitably touch upon the topics of the cyborg city and the kind of the digital twin of a city. It enables a high degree of the interconnection among every single element within our city, and where every piece of data undergo analysis as well as equip every form of operation with the smart response. This is why we are aiming for when we are talking about a smart city. And now let's getting back into the issue of governance. And we believe when we want to deliver the data-driven city governments, and will lead to the digital transformation of the city. And apparently it cannot be achieved through the technology only. And rather it must return to the respective domain experts of individual agencies, as well as incorporating application of ICT technology and the steering over the data science. And we believe this component can be strongly interaction is the only way to strengthen the efficiency of data-driven digital transformation. So in this slide, we want to, based on the different dimension, to dialogue and to organize the different dimensions of how to implement the data-driven city governments for our city. And so in terms of the business-driven, we adopted the 1+7 domain as a framework to guide all the related efforts. And the implementation is backed by actually the responsibility and the respective needs of the different agencies. And for the technology-driven aspect, we built up the smarter city committee to steering and supervise all the related policies and the decision making. And the TPMO is just like our project office and created under it to conduct all the related projects. Also, we officially established a data governance committee, and it was just like in charge of the data side. In our Smart Taipei framework, and which can guide all of our efforts and resources to implement the smart city project. So besides this vision, such as the core structure, central piece, and the theme of the domains, and as well as the promotion measures and we adopt, we hope to make our approach as systematic and orderly as possible. We face numerous challenges with implementing our smart city mechanism because of startups or innovation and have a high chance of failure. And we cannot plan our budget in a way that gives too much room for failure. Besides that, it's also a social innovation mechanism we have, and which engage all the stakeholders to join efforts on the city revolution and the progressions. And therefore, a very important task for us is to create a structure that allows room for the innovation and limited risk-taking. In the Taipei city government, we have established a collaborative innovation framework, and it covers how we devices and city government's strategy map, and the steering, approach, positioning, and conduct the POC and the pilot program, and finally allow the projects to scale up. All these the process and are supported by the two main dynamics, and the top-down and the bottom-up. And both the floor and the ledge is very important. And the top-down, or we call it the bottom-up, one is more driven by the companies or business. We call it the private sectors. Even if the POC proof is successful, it doesn't mean we can just easy implement in our city. And that is why for this year, and we have places more focuses on the top-down. And that is where the government and pose the challenge, and the private sector try to solve them. And under this approach, once the POC and approved, and the budget or directions will be more in line with our policy, thereby boost the implementation rate of the projects. In our purpose, we make effort use the innovation mechanism to stimulate change in the organization culture in the case of TPMO. And regardless whether the top-down or bottom-up, we seek to make the new cases into a series of quick win, and a consecutive and a quicker and smaller success. And it's really helpful and convince and drive the city agencies forward, and making them more willing to accept the unconventional views and change their cultures. And the end result of the adjustment is their attitude toward the policies and making room for the potentials. So now we're talking about some of the data side, and the use of the data and is comparable to build up the system of the pipers. And the Taipei's pool of the innovation talent is scattered across the different sectors and the domains. So if we have the data, we can accumulate and conduct a follow-up analysis. And here you can see the fundamental works with the data conversion further up, and finally the level of data analysis and even synthesis together, and through the overall construction and the related works with the big data processing, and we gradually bring the infrastructure across all the different levels into the existence. What we try to accomplish is to bring the big data system prevalent to city governance into the existing IOC in the respective agencies through the sensor platform. Here we can see we have the 31 agencies of the city government, and notice how the core function of the city is divided up and to monitoring or respectively by the IOC. And another dimension we call is divided by the districts. So that's the different and the administrative districts can monitor the layer and their own domains. Next. Now we will quickly cover the application and how we can deal with the COVID-19 crisis, and given our solid foundation of and the infrastructure covering in the previous part, as well as how the big center plays a role here. Currently, our city and emerging team in charge of the COVID-19 preventions. We have the COVID-19 Prevention Health Status Report, APP. And this tool enables those in the quarantine and to report back to us on their status in real time. And so we can make sure that everyone and under the scope and we have settings. And also tracking their locations. And here we also relatively famous, the real name, the registrations, the face mask, vending machine, and assistant. And because the special is the face mask now is considered and and rationed medical resources, and with allocated quota for each individual and per period. So here, you can see that for the city government to connect to the check with the central government's database to ensure that everyone get their quota. There are many the information about the security issue and the need to resolve first if you want to connect to the central government database. So we got to, and so we need to do some efforts and help realize the vision of the cashless and the city and the contactless service. And another very important application we use in Taipei City is a real name registrations app. We call it My Core because there's so many venues and in the Taipei was be closed by the COVID-19 and the issues. So, however, this the venue still monitored and divided into the category A or B, and but so far, so many the venues, and we monitor it by this assistant, and so the application also ensure no data will be saved on the local end, and we will put all the data and the sensitive personal information into our cloud. So everything is concentrated on the cloud database. The purpose of because of the security issue. So should there be a needs and the contact tracking guideline and compliance by the data privacy, and it will be observed. And if the information will be deleted, and upon the mandated deadlines. Now we very quickly review some samples of the big data centers and some dashboards. And the database is maintained to meet the needs of COVID-19 preventions. So this and including some information on risk management or some and medical resources availability and the real name, the registration, the control, and the summary analysis of the related news. And during the pandemic period, and the Taipei City government hosts the regular meeting to discuss the latest development of COVID-19. However, it's encountering the problems such as the segmented information, and which is and prevents the policymaker from having a full grasp of the situations. To resolve the issue of the fragment data, and we have integrated the COVID-19 related information and with the latest pandemic status for the Taipei City and through the big data centers. Next slide. And for example, just like this, the dashboard and from the hospital information you see here, and we can determine the availability of a user rate of the pressure ward or regular sick bed on the page. And this one, and here you can see the number of the people being quarantined, and as well as those who have received the testing. And you can also see which the district they are physically located in, and as well as related risk assessment numbers. On this page, you can see the Taipei City currently have the totally and 50 and quarantine hotel, and you can see and where the hotel are located and how many people are quarantined inside these hotels. Here you can see the result of our real name registration system and for the venue. And the data is uploaded through the scanning the ID card or my code, the QR code. This is also show the variations of the overall volume through time. We also have the status on the stimulus and the function. Okay, so this is about our how to recover our economic power or status. So we want to make sure the function and can be work and in normally. So we keep the track of the statistics of the function of the merge with the city issues, electronic wallet and the other and the cashless the payment bases. So here the page showing the trend of the important news and the summaries and the issue through the list dashboard system. You can see how we collect the data or opinion and put in the pool and conduct analysis. The end result will play an important role and the relevance and the material for our and the policy and the policy makers. Okay. This is the end of my briefing today, and thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the CIO, Dr. Liu, for his wonderful talk. I think the one thing very important is to become smart. We need data. So the key word here is data-driven. And yes. Our second talk by the Mr. Markus Kuhn, Strategy Director from Helsinki, Finland. He also talked about data-driven. So Mr. Kuhn, you can.
Thank you very much. Yes, so a few words on accelerating the recovery through data-driven collaboration. And maybe just as a background, I started in this position in the city of Helsinki in April. Very interesting time to start directly into the middle of this COVID crisis. And I think this has accelerated a lot on how and what we have done with data. If you go to the next slide, maybe just as a bit of a context, what our data team in the city of Helsinki has been working on already for some time is a new data strategy. We have a good strategy. We are setting up a team of people doing cross-organizational collaboration in what comes to utilizing data and AI in developing the city services. To put this into context, one topic we have been discussing on a strategic level here a lot is us as a part of the European Union, also how we as a city can accelerate the development. Is of course a bit different context here in Europe, and we have a kind of a long tradition in the EU on free movement of people, and of course the system what comes to privacy in Europe is different than in Asia, in the United States. And one topic what we are a lot thinking about here is how can we use the sharing of personal data so that the cities could have a trusted role in ensuring the minimum requirements for interoperability from private sector to public sector. So this is just a very interesting question. Now, come in April, come in COVID, of course, this has boosted a lot on the need on real-time data in services in decision making. If you go to the next slide, the thinking here already for some time has been on how we can provide our residents accessible services. There's a lot of data that the city uses to deliver services. How can we use this in a best way to ensure everyday life convenience, services that are digitally available anytime, any device, and automate this? And I'm coming from the private sector myself with a long background there. And of course, there is, I say, a lot of potential what we can still do there, and I think we are on a good track. If you look at the next slide a bit on Helsinki strategy, the current strategy was done some years ago, and the vision there really is to be the most functional city in the world. So what does this mean? The intent of the city of Helsinki is with a very kind of Scandinavian and I would say Finnish approach to be very pragmatic, to improve things every day a bit, to make this more, to kind of make everyday living easier and more pleasant in Helsinki. And I think this is kind of this has been a very good vision. We have been working against this vision already for some years now, and I think convenience and building an environment where things work conveniently is very, very, very important and very specific for Helsinki. We are a fairly small city in a global scale, but large enough to really have an impact and change how we work with the kind of biggest problems of our times, be it responding in an agile way to the corona crisis or be it the climate crisis. We can kind of and are in a way to make a very functional, systemic innovation here. And this is, of course, not possible without the data. So looking at the next slide, the idea here from a strategic perspective is really to focus on doing and on actions. Like I said, this is a unique environment for getting things done due to the size and the scale. We have a very high level of people skill sets in technology in compared to the per capita in compared to the relative size of the city. And here it's really about how to, in this context, open the data for the companies, for the citizens active in Helsinki. And if you look at the next slide, we have a fairly long tradition in what is called open data. Already some years ago, lots of the data that the city has was opened and for kind of for free use for companies and third party sectors. And if you look at the examples that have been built through software companies, the open application interfaces have enabled a whole bunch of services, nothing kind of unique here, but things from events to kind of how to use the location data, the map data for city bikes, and also looking at the next slide, covering a whole large bunch of application areas to all the sectors of life. And this is very much building on a strategy of the city as a platform and how to open up the data for companies, for third parties to develop. So just quickly, maybe from the perspective, of course, compared to many of the global metropoles, these numbers are not large, but they're very large for our context. And I think this comes back to the point of Helsinki as the most functional city in the world. This is an amount of services, amount of registries that can be comprehensively approached, and using data and AI, building the kind of intelligent way of serving our residents, the employees, visitors, companies, and the third sector. So how have we done this? As an example, we have an innovation company which is fully owned by the city, the Forum Virium on next slide. We have a few examples of what we have done in the last years together with the innovation company. There on slide 11, you can see a picture of the area we call Kalasatama, which has been built to maximize the use of data open to the public and building a smart city district. And for example, if we go to the next slide, so this is the Kalasatama area, and what we have done there is many little things, lots of innovation, lots of experiments. This is a lot of also bringing experiment culture into when we build new areas. So this has been a fully new area. And just as an example of that, for example, the robot buses on the next slide, which we have been testing in public transportation with a Finnish company called Sensible 4. So really about opening the city spaces for testing and for collaboration in smart mobility projects. A fully different example of the collaboration is related to Corona. There is a consortium of universities and a private company doing testing for coronavirus with PrEP tests. So on next slide, you can just as a small example, a case we are doing in one of the larger health stations at the moment, where there is a trial to research whether this new technology testing from patients' exhaled air could be usable. This is we don't know, it's an experiment whether this will work, but it's just an example of what type of things we are constantly doing in order to provide the infrastructure and the assets we as a city have for building new things. Next slide, please. So in the request for this, when preparing for this seminar also, we thought it would be good maybe to open up also a bit on how we approach our recovery in general. And of course, data is a very key element in there. Like mentioned in the beginning, we have scaled up dashboards in weeks, where I would say in the past, we would probably have needed months or even years. So lots of quick trials, tests in order to have real-time data in use, in order to understand how we as a city as a whole, throughout all the sectors, can best respond to the coronavirus. As an example, there, like we all know, there's a lot of uncertainties in the environment. We have hooked up with companies, be it job-seeking platforms, be it software companies providing purchasing solutions for private sector, to really understand the proxy data on which sectors in the economy economic sectors which are strong in Helsinki could start growing again, and to keep the city as open as possible with the restrictions that are. And this is a lot about data, a lot about real daily data management. So we have on next slide, just to show you the picture, a city level program which has 3 basic streams, where we on a daily and weekly basis analyze our operating environment, what are the key changes in how we can restore the confidence of the people, to get people back moving and move on the street, so to say, activate our marketplaces, activate our cities. We have a stream focusing on how to boost businesses and entrepreneurship, a lot about how to use the spaces and the resources of the city as a platform for new commercial activities in this new situation. And of course, then how to get an agile culture into city management, how to kind of shift resources in this new situation, be it using digital ways to deliver our basic services, or just sharing information and through better data collaboration with our partners. So this is maybe in short. I think we can skip the next slide and maybe just 2 examples to finish. What has this then meant in practice? Our recovery program started in April. In just few weeks, we put up on page 17 a new way to kind of serve the elderly people. We put up a call center, so that's basically our next slide then. So we moved in just some weeks from a on-site physical service to a call center driven, digitally enabled service to deliver home deliveries together with the retailers, together with third sector in Helsinki. And this would not have been possible without quickly setting up a cross-organizational team from inside the city and out, and taking new digital tools and technology in use. Of course, the next step is what we can learn from this and improve using the data we covered. And then on next slide, that's maybe to finish up with just a few other examples. We, like I think in most of the global cities, we opened up our spaces to entrepreneurs. We have boosted new companies in startups to support how kind of companies that could even benefit from the crisis can accelerate their growth. And of course, also very important sector is how the education was in some weeks moved from a physical on-site to a digital schooling, which is, I think, something quite unique, how fast and which scale we did it. Basically, in the months of April to June, the Finnish vocational schools, basically 13,000 students went fully online. And this is, of course, a big leap, and I think many of those things will, of course, also stay from in the future. So maybe to sum up, so this as a kind of viewpoint from the city of Helsinki, how data can be used and digital can be used in accelerating the recovery. And on my last slide, on the next page, maybe just to wrap up, so there's Helsinki wants to be the most functional city in the world, and by intelligently using digital and data, we can be definitely a place where it's safe to live, study, and work, also when long after the coronavirus is over. And this is kind of where I would finish my presentation here. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for Mr. Kun. Also, it's showing evidence that data is important. Use the data, especially open data here. So I think that also today I learned that Helsinki is the most functional city of the world. So definitely after COVID-19 virus situation is over, I'd like to take vacation there. I hope you have a good time there. Okay, thank you. Our next speaker He's from the Poland. Okay, with Mr. Kamil Ches. Kamil Ches. Okay. This is the head of international investor relations in the city of Warsaw, Poland. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can I see my presentation? All right. Good afternoon once again. I will talk some things about sustainability in smart cities and quality of life on the example of my city. Can I have the next slide, please? I will start with the location. So we are in the southeast of Poland, close to the border with Ukraine and Slovakia. Next slide, please. When it comes to statistics, we are a medium city, both in terms of the area and the number of inhabitants. Over 220,000 inhabitants makes us a middle-sized city for Polish conditions, and major branches of industry that we have are aerospace, IT, and outsourcing and shared services. The logos that you can see at the bottom show the most important companies for our economy. Okay. Can I have the next slide? And now I will talk a little bit about how we approach to smart city. The fields of implementation of smart city in Rzeszów include, of course, mobility, IT, energy, municipal services, education, governance, architecture, and quality of life. And in all those fields, we try to develop innovations. Here you can see some latest innovations, electric buses, fully electric buses that we have purchased recently. We plan to have at least half of the fleet of buses in Rzeszów that will be fully electric. Now it's roughly 10%. And on the right, you can see a bus shelter. It's not a normal bus shelter because it is the bus shelter which is air conditioned in the summer and heated in the winter. As far as I know, only Dubai in the world has such a solution. Of course, they don't heat their bus shelters. Okay, the next slide, please. When it comes to mobility, we talk about modern bus fleet, of course, but what is important for us is to shift the mobility patterns and to encourage the inhabitants of the city of Rzeszów to use alternative ways of moving from place to place. That's why we have encouraged them to use bike rental companies, and of course, e-vehicles are of importance. We have installed 10 charging points for e-vehicles. They have some priority when finding a parking spot as well. So more and more people tend to buy electric vehicles. If they cannot use public transport, they should at least use non-emission transport as e-vehicles. Okay, next slide. When it comes to mobility, of course, ITS is of importance for us. We have the control center that controls all the situation that happens in the roads. I am fully aware that most cities in the world right now have such solutions, but it is good to emphasize that, because without effective public transport, we will not encourage citizens to change their moving patterns, and they will not want to go on buses from place to place without these buses being punctual, for example. And ITS helps us keep them punctual. Okay, next one. This is one of the bus stations, which is located in the city center, and it's again not a normal bus station because it is covered in PV panels. You can see on the roofs and on the walls of the bus station we have PV panels, which are produced by our local company. And this bus station does not need any external source of energy. So through PV panels, it produces so much energy that it is even transmitted to a nearby school. So all the needs for energy are fully satisfied with the PV panels that are installed on the roofs and on the walls of this bus station. Okay, next one. Of course, as the city which tries to be smart and innovative, we try to develop also educational faculties and all the solutions that let us let our job market be closer to the university market, so to speak. So we try to teach pupils what they will really need in the job market in Rzeszów. Okay, next one. Of course, what is very important and turned out to be even more important in the era of pandemics of the COVID-19 is the remote education. And this remote education was enabled by Microsoft, by cooperation between the city and Microsoft. Even before pandemics in 2019, because the pandemics in Poland started roughly in March 2020, we started cooperating with Microsoft before pandemics in 2019, and all the pupils in our schools, both all the state schools, primary and secondary ones, and all the teachers and all the parents of the pupils at those schools have free access to Microsoft. It turned out to be very effective and very needful when the lockdown started, because they couldn't go to schools, so they could use, for example, Microsoft Teams for their remote lessons. Okay, next slide. Okay, we try to be client-friendly as the city office. So whenever you, as the citizen, want to do something with the official stuff that you normally do with the city office, you can. You don't have to visit the city office, which is located in the city center. You can either call us. There is one phone number, one info line that lets you, one helpline that lets you deal with all the official stuff. And next slide will show you something that only Rzeszów has in Poland, is the external municipal serving points. So we decided to install our serving points in the shopping malls so that the citizens can deal with the official business by simply going shopping, and on the way they can change their ID, or they can register their car. They do not need to go to the city center, and that's why the traffic jams are lighter in the city center. Okay, next slide, please. But what I really want to emphasize in my presentation is the Urban Lab. We are just one of two cities in Poland that developed what is called Urban Lab. Urban Lab, some of you might have heard of the idea. If not, you might have heard of the idea of living labs. Such living labs, for example, exist in Amsterdam or Barcelona. And for us, this is something that is the most important thing about introducing a smart city, because Urban Lab lets us integrate different age and social groups in the city, gather their ideas. We enhance creating and implementation of innovation, and we diagnose the problems that the city has and try to find solutions. Next slide, please. We work mostly with young generation. We, of course, cooperate with Microsoft, as I said before, so we try to encourage them to do Minecraft. They can do some artistic activities in Urban Lab. Okay, next one. We organize debates, we organize robot challenge, all those things that integrate different age groups in the city. Everyone can visit the Urban Lab because it has its seat in the center of the city. Or you can join us via Facebook, via Instagram, or other social networks. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, we, of course, organize some workshops, mainly via Zoom right now because of the pandemics. Okay, next one. And of course, we, as I said before, we try to engage all the age groups, and the ultimate goal of the Urban Lab in Rzeszów is to create a city, a livable city, a city with good quality of life. And we believe that this quality of life can only be achieved with the citizens, because the citizens will try to project, will try to design the space that surrounds them. And when we create the city which is good for both young and old people, this will be a livable and good quality of life city. Okay, so we encourage young people with their grandfathers and grandmothers to design, for example, playing fields in the city and the recreational areas. We organize such events as Robot Challenge, for example. Next slide. And next slide, sorry. Okay, open data is something that has already been discussed here today. So we are at the beginning of our road in implementation of open data, but open data is something that we know that we need to do. And this is one of the goals of the implementation of Urban Lab in Rzeszów. We want to create special portals and special applications that will let startups and citizens of the city of Rzeszów to use the open data to make the quality of life in Rzeszów even better. Okay, next slide, please. And what we do at Urban Lab, as I said before, we try to implement the idea of 880. The idea is that if the city is livable and if the city offers good space for both 8-year-olds and 80-year-olds, it means that this city is livable and this city offers good quality of life to practically every citizen, because mainly young and old generation have some disabilities, or they have some limitations in moving, for example. So if you are able to create together with the citizens, of course, the space that will let them live a good quality of life, it will be the city that is good for everyone. Okay, so we organize what is called the acceleration program. So every citizen can make up an idea, and some of these ideas will be implemented in the city of Rzeszów within 2 years. That's why we have the Urban Lab in the city. Okay, next slide. Okay, it's of course in Polish, but I will just say a few words. The ideas that can be accelerated include, of course, creating and designing city space, especially recreational areas and playing fields, greenery in the city, and moving from place to place. So basically mobility. We do not have too much money to implement those ideas, but this will be a pilotage program. If they turn out to be effective in 1 year time, they will be implemented in a whole city. Okay, next slide. And next slide, because I've already covered this topic. And one more thing, just to end with, we are still in the pandemic's world. So we, as the Urban Lab, organize events and organize actions that aim at, so to speak, acknowledging and recognizing people who help other people. And we would like to create what is called a bank time. Basically, this is the idea that when you have some time, you can devote this time to other people, just to do the shopping for them or to walk their dog. And we try to find such people and create a special application that will let them matchmake. So that would be it for now. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you for Mr. Chess. I think we learned a lot about the idea of Urban Lab, and that will help the city become the capital of innovation. So it's good to know that. Our next speaker is Dr. Barakta, who is a Deputy Director General from Ankara, Turkey. So please, Dr. Barakta.
Hello. Yes, my name is Hüseyin Bayraktar. I am the Deputy General Director of GIS in Turkey. Before the other presenters talked about the local level of the smart cities, and I will talk about our national strategy about smart cities. I'd like to welcome all participants throughout the world. It's a pleasure for me to be connected in this CTalk session within 2020 Smart Cities Summit and Expo. Despite all the pressures that COVID-19 pandemic applies to human, breaking out the challenges become a common responsibility for all of us without considering any border. but cherishing the humanity. Within this concept, I would like to explain our approach to smart cities, the Turkish model in the smart cities area. Next slide, please. As you would all know, Turkey is located just between Europe and Asia. Like as all other countries, but a bit more than many of them, increasing population and movement appears with more necessities and challenges in city life. World's population is increasing rapidly, but giving a huge projection in the population ratio of urban and rural areas. Next slide, please. In today's urbanization, there are many streaming approaches which try to solve specific issues of urbanization. Our smart cities approach includes a roof structure, connecting them all by a data-driven approach. This is why the smart cities are extremely necessary of our future life. There are some examples of strategical actions or roadmaps mostly prepared by cities, the local governments around the world. Some of the countries have policies that are declared applying cities in various ways. These policies change from city to city, which would cause interoperability challenges, both in technical and administrative structures. In order to provide a national movement and establish a comprehensive structure, we have prepared a national smart city strategy. In the case, Turkey's smart cities and strategy and action plan is the fourth national level smart city strategy and action plan. This is very important. Next slide, please. This approach is based on three pillars in our model. Firstly, the solutions that will form our future should be different than today. Beyond the digitalization, smart cities bring together many approaches, including geospatial data, technology management, and socio-economic factors. And thirdly, technology would not be independent from sustainability in smart cities. Next slide, please. Before passing to the details, I'd like to mention our national development plan also includes policies regarding smart cities. This makes a complementary strategic approach that binds all relevant sectors and other policies. 11th development plan of Turkey mentions our main smart city policies which are relevant with the national strategy. These are local smart city strategies, maturity assessment and guidance of local governments, national production in smart city applications, developing smart city ecosystem. Next slide, please. In this section, I'd like to give more details about our smart city strategic approach. Next slide, please. By December 2019, Turkey's 2020 and 2023 National Smart City Strategy and Action Plan was published by Presidential Circular. That means that the plan is approved by our President so that all public institutions and organizations must fulfill their duties and responsibilities under the coordination of our Ministry of Environment and Urbanization. Next slide, please. In our plan, we determined 16 sub-components of smart city. It's very important to establish a data-driven structure so that geographical information systems and geospatial data takes place in the first rank. This component structure also lets us to define organizational responsibilities in a better way. Next slide, please. In the preparation phase, we conducted 5 phases. These are analysis of current station, preparation of strategy and action plan. Besides, we prepared smart city maturity assessment model, monitoring and assessment model in order to monitor improvements of the actions, and development of monitoring and assessment system. We have organized many workshops and held many meetings within the stakeholders. This process is certainly realized by a participatory approach. Next slide, please. In analysis of current station phases, we organized several workshops and conducted a questionnaire with participation of 327 local government institutions. Furthermore, various international strategy documents and city maturity assessment models were analyzed. We have achieved the final version of the strategy and action plan by the support of remarks taken from related institutions. Besides, maturity assessment model is designed for comparing the maturities of the cities. Pilot studies on maturity assessment were conducted in Selçuklu and Istanbul Beyoğlu municipalities. Monitoring and assessment model will be the success criteria for the actions to reach the target values and monitor the evaluate the progress of the actions periodically in action plan. The activities carried out by municipalities for smart cities will be monitored and assessed on this system. We have a system and we will be monitoring all the municipalities. Next slide, please. In the strategy and action plan, we determined 4 strategic goals, 9 objectives, and 40 actions. Our vision is to provide livable and sustainable cities that add value to life. Next slide, please. Here in the slide, we can see 26 main actions. Under the 15th action, we have 14 more actions which regard to major improvement in each component. I'd rather not go through all of them one by one. However, we would be pleased to make deeper conversations in the future if interested attendees require specific issues. We can answer the questions about these issues. Next slide, please. But as a sum up, we may talk about some of our planned actions. Our strategic goals can be explained as establishing a smart city ecosystem, improving capability, providing interoperability, providing coordination. 40 actions been to these goals. As specific examples to these actions, I would like to explain our relevant projects. We recently launched a smart city guidance and a capacity building project. We will be pleased to share outputs of this project as well. It will include a huge comprehensive content for the municipalities. Another important action is to form a reference architecture and national smart city architecture. Also, there will be local system architectures compliant with the national level. We conducted smart city technology studies. We will prepare a data dictionary. These are very important actions that we are conducting for the interoperability. Besides, these will be in compliance and interconnected with national spatial data infrastructure. And regarding the governance, we have specific actions. We will establish a smart city governance mechanism which will include local governments. The Turkish smart city model underlines the importance of governance, participation of citizens, and innovation and productive ecosystem and standardization. Next slide, please. Another important action is the smart city maturity. We have started maturity assessment studies for all our provinces. Within the scope of the project, the implementation of smart city maturity assessment model, it's aimed to determine the competencies of cities in Turkey related to smart city governance and implementations by conducting questionnaires and interviews which necessary and with pastors. Maturity evaluation pilot studies were carried out in Konya Selçuklu and Istanbul Beyoğlu and Esenler municipalities. With realizing the same studies in all of our cities, the Smart City Index will be created by comparing the maturity levels of the cities. smart city maturity assessment would be another issue for international cooperations. We would like to assess other cities based on our model if required in the future. Next slide, please. I would like to give some examples of our leading smart city and GIS projects. Next slide, please. In Istanbul, Istanbul Esenler Urban Transformation Project was launched in order to test the smart city applications in line with the strategic and action plan. By this project, it is aimed to implement many smart city applications in the infrastructures and superstructures to be constructed. The common use, security, and integrated management of smart city infrastructures will be ensured. By its size, it's like 800 hectares of project area. Its population and applications that will be covered. This is a very important project. It will be a good example that is done from the scratch. Like 200,000 people will be living in this city. Next slide, please. These are some projects of our ministry, which is nationwide, and I will talk about some of them. Next slide, please. We have a cloud information system provides geospatial modules for the free use of municipalities. The system includes 22 geospatial modules and provides local standard spatial data production, decrease in license costs, improve service quality of municipalities, data infrastructure for smart cities. Excuse me, I'm hearing other voices. Thank you. Other slide, please. Next slide, please. Yes. Especially the spatial plans become an important example in Turkey. Spatial plan approval processes are managed on a spatial data infrastructure together with the plan data. Spatial plan data standardization has been entered into force as well. Next slide, please. In Turkey, we have standardized geospatial data by 32 geographical data teams. We also use Inspire data teams as well. Currently, we conduct an integration project in which we collect standard data from institutions. We published and shared these data and metadata by our Atlas and GeoPortal applications. Next slide, please. Finally, I'd like to give a short information about our Digital Turkey project. We produced 3D data of all buildings in settlement areas of Turkey, which cover approximately 50,000 kilometers square. It provides opportunities to manage 3D data and make analysis. We make 3D data for all of our cities in Turkey. LOD2, next slide. And as conclusions, conduct our national smart city strategy and action plan in collaboration of our institutions in Turkey. There is a big knowledge and experience gained throughout these studies and projects at all sides, public and private institutions, local governments, and non-governmental organizations. We're pleased to share our experience and cooperate with interested parties as well. I would like to thank you in my last words. Thanks for everyone that are attending our conference.
Thank you. Thank you for Dr. Balaktash. It's a good overview of the strategy and action plan of the Turkey Smart City and also some good examples. And our next speaker is Okay, so Dr. Marusz Sager, head of the strategy of the entrepreneur department of Lublin, Poland. Please, yeah, Dr. Sagan.
Good afternoon again. It's my pleasure to be a speaker during this CTalk conference. Today, I would like to tell you about the smart mobility solutions experiences on example of the city of Lublin. Next slide, please. The city of Lublin is a major city in eastern Poland and one of the most developed city in the country in terms of the university potential, in terms of the high-tech priority sectors. Our economy is based on the mostly services sector, especially IT outsourcing, medical services, but also we have quite strong automotive and biotechnological sector. We are really proud of the of our internationalization in terms of number of foreign students, and Lublin is one of the leading city in Europe when we look at the number of foreign students in the whole population of students. By the way, we have close to 500 students from Taiwan studying at the medical university, so I meet every day Taiwanese students close to my office. Next slide, please. But coming back to the topic of my presentations, I would like to tell you how the process of building smart mobility strategy were executed for the last 10-15 years. And I would like to start with the problems, with the challenges that we face as a city before 2010. And we have, if I can use this expression, we had only troubles and problems. That was related to the very tough period of transformation of the city in the 90s, when the Poland was moving from the communist system to the free market economy. And the city really suffered from this process. And what we had before 2010, practically Lublin was cut off from the rest of the country. We didn't have any serious adequate transport infrastructure. The quality of the services provided by the Lublin transport companies was really low. The system was not unified. There was very low frequency of the public transport vehicles and the number of courses. And of course, the system was completely owned by the city with no differentiation of the different means of the transportation. So this is what we had 10 years ago. Next slide, please. So I divided my description of the process on two stages. The first stage is the development of the public transport, actually, that started in 2011. And I think that the crucial thing was the construction of the city beltway, the bypass of the city, that was planned since 1998 and finally finished in 2014. Probably for the big metropolitan cities in the world, in Europe, this is not the case, but for the small and medium-sized cities in Asia, in Europe, in Africa, everywhere, the lack of the beltway, the lack of the system that is kicking out the heavy transport from the city is one of the main reasons that the cities cannot develop the public transport. So to have a good public transport, you have to get rid of the heavy transport. And in case of Lublin, that was a number of hundreds of very heavy vans, lorries going from Ukraine to Western Europe directly through the city center, destroying the city infrastructure and enabling to develop the effective transportation system. So that was completed in 2014. And then we are quite ready to implement different elements of the public transport. One of them was City Bike, which is enormously popular in Lublin, but also in other Polish cities. We have close to 100 stations, and the total number of rentals per season is on average 500,000 yearly. what we see now, the popularity of such system in the country is going down because we have better the road and bike roads infrastructure, and people are buying more and more private bikes, so they are not using the city system as they used to 5 or 4 years ago. Then we decided, which is also not maybe very unique, to invest in the intelligent transport systems. Now, close to 60% of all intersections in the city are supported by ITS. Then, of course, we have related city bus stops covered by the system. And what is quite unique in Lublin, we have the system in our mobility strategy that is using trolleybus. Trolleybus is a maybe not so renowned mode of transportation in the world, but in Poland, in Eastern Europe, in Russia, in Ukraine, it is quite popular. And we are heavily developing in that system. So we are developing the routes, we are buying new trolleybuses, and we are trying to modernize the traction. And as the result of our strategy, we were able to increase the level of zero emission rate to 30% in 2019. Next slide, please. The second stage that was developed parallelly, that was implementing the urban solutions for the mobility related to the car sharing, private initiatives, and all kind of actions not related directly to the city, not owned by the city, but coordinated by the city. So we decided to invite private partners to open the car sharing system. This is one of the biggest car sharing system in Poland, provided by Panek Car Sharing. We have electric kick scooters also provided by the private operators like Bolt, like Volt. Of course, we have Bolt, we have Uber, we have electric scooters. We have also the system of big delivery cars operated by the CTB. We invested in charging points, so we decided to diversify the mobility ecosystem in Lublin to optimize the cost of the system. Next slide, please. So what do we believe what are the values of our approach, of our strategy? First of all, this is the quality and accessibility, and we also focus on the pedestrian problems. We prepared the special documents, so-called the pedestrian, how do we call it in Polish? Pedestrian standards in English. And this document is describing how should we design the roads, the pedestrian roads, how should we design the bike roads to enable the pedestrian to move efficiently in the city. Of course, we are also using the technology as most of the world cities use. This is the technology response to user needs. And we are trying to integrate of various means of transport, which also is creating a certain problems and challenges, because, when we opened the bike system in Lublin, we were losing a lot of passengers in our public mobility systems like public buses and public trolley buses. So the first year after opening the bike system, the drop of the number of passengers in the buses was close to 10-15%, and that created a serious problems with the budgets of the public city government system. But in the next years, people came back to the buses, and the situation were more stable. Next slide, please. And what is ahead? What is the future of smart mobility? We want to achieve the level of zero emission in the city until the end of 2021, and that will be 50%. Now we are buying 66 electric buses. We want to be a fully zero-emission city in 2025. We are working on the new intersections and connecting them to the ITS and to have, again, 100% of the intersections equipped with the ITS. We are investing in the street chargers for electric vehicles. This is the one line. The second line is that we are trying to implement the city bike system supplemented with electric non-station on freight bikes. At the same time, we are constructing at the outskirts of the city the system of the interchange infrastructure like kiss and ride stations, bike and ride, park and ride, and this is under the constructions. And finally, we want to integrate and to coordinate all kind of means of transportations in the city, private owned and the public, I mean the city owned, the city government owned. Next slide, please. All panelists were asked to show the solutions and the challenges that faces the public transport during the pandemic. Next slide, please. And can I have next slide? Thank you. And again, probably this is not maybe something really unique compared to other European and Asian cities, but we implemented the system that allowed us to avoid the growth of the number of ill people. By the way, in Lublin, the number of people affected by COVID is quite limited, and of course there are many reasons of that. And we don't have also many death cases in the city. This is also due to the very effective medical system in the city that it's allowing to treat effectively our citizens. But coming back to the public transport, from March, 50% of the number of seating could be occupied. And this, from June, that was 50% of the number of sitting positions or 30% of the number of total sitting positions and standing positions. And that lasted, that is lasting from June. We suspended the use of the city bikes in the period from April to June. Next slide. We were also doing quite a lot of actions for the safety of passengers. That includes daily disinfection of vehicles, also limiting direct service. We had to adapt timetables to the need of passengers, but we also were trying to be user-friendly for the customers, so we temporarily suspend the city tickets for the lockdown period and moved it to the later period, to the later date. Also, we are not allowing passengers to use warm button to open the doors. And of course, the distance, no possibility of buying the tickets from the driver, and obligation to cover the mouth and nose, which is still in line. And when I'm traveling the buses, I have to say that close to 100% people are using the masks for the mouth and the nose. Next slide, please. So to conclude, what was important in our approach, that was the integrating the private and public system and to try to coordinate the solutions to have the most effective system in the as can be developed for that kind of stage of the development. And the second conclusion is that City of Lublin is very focused on the strategic way of planning and thinking. So our goal is to work in the 10 years strategic period. Now we are at the end of 2020, we are preparing for the 2030 as the next strategic period. So every 10 years we are developing our goals and we are effectively fulfilling these goals for the people, for the citizens. Thank you so much for that part of the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sagan. Thank you for the overview of the smart mobility in Lublin. Okay, so in the panel, our last speaker, will be Ms. Aurora Ganezal from is the Director of the Program Beneficiaries Development in Davao City in Philippines. So please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I will be talking on education and capacity building as a tool or tools to address climate change, because in the midst of the pandemic, climate change is still one of the biggest concerns of peoples and government. Therefore, it needs a lot of realities now that we are facing, and it is not only a problem of climate change, but it is intertwining with other economic developments such as human health and poverty reduction. And during climate change, the most vulnerable people are the farmers and small landholders, which are the backbone of our economy. Therefore, the government and the private sector have to collaborate, coordinate, and cooperate to respond and organize needed resources to implement mechanisms and educate people and communities to reduce the impact of climate change. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Now, extreme climatic conditions like typhoons, droughts, can destroy or reduce our production, destroy crops. This situation is very prevalent, especially in countries where agriculture is the source of income, and the Philippines is one of them. As economic resources are depleted, human health is affected, malnutrition, hunger, and diseases become prevalent. With this scenario, the social development economic of countries will be greatly affected because resources will be siphoned to affected population for them to survive and get back to their feet. Sad to know that developing countries are most vulnerable to these impacts because they lack the resources to do more to the high cost of its effects. They can only do so much. Next slide, please. But what is education and capacity building as defined? Education is an essential element of the global response to climate change. It helps people to understand and address the impact of global warming, increasing climate literacy among the young people, encourage change in their attitude and behavior, and helps them to adapt climate change. On the other hand, UNDP defines capacity building, which refers to the process of changing attitudes and behaviors, specifically on imparting knowledge and developing skills while maximizing the benefits of participation, knowledge exchange, and ownership. Next slide, please. Now, why is it very important? Because education and capacity building are able to promote public awareness and accelerate learning of various concepts and practices in order to create knowledgeable and informed citizens, which will help communities, governments, and other stakeholders to craft climate change mitigation and measures. However, building the capacities of stakeholders to increase their knowledge and awareness on concerns of climate change become relevant today. However, for the farmers, they are also able to adapt agricultural technologies, diversification of livelihood systems, accessing financial resources like microfinance, agri-credit, and crop insurance for safety nets and to assure everyone's food security. Next slide. Educating and building capacities do not happen overnight. It is an evolving process, and therefore it is interdependent with other areas of development, such as the economy, poverty reduction, health, nutrition, and the like. And capacity needs are evolving, and therefore plans and strategies to address the need should be both long-term and short-term. Communities and governments, together with the private sector, should identify their priorities, craft policies, and invest in capacitating their citizens. And to strengthen these capacities of the different stakeholders, we are going to conduct capacity building, a capacity need assessment in order to identify gaps and weaknesses. This should be participated by the different sectors of the society to ensure that capacity needs are identified and addressed because their opinions matter. Next slide, please. What are the barriers to education and capacity building? One is the limited financial resources allocated to climate change activities and programs. The bulk of government resources go to building and rehabilitating of physical infrastructure such as roads and bridges, irrigation facilities, education, and the like. Second is the limited knowledge and information on climate change. Although there are trainings at the community level, community folks do not attend and seem not to be interested or the least of their concern. Number three is there is a limited access to knowledge. Those who were trained failed to impart their knowledge to their communities because they felt it is not their responsibility. Next slide, please. 4, the lack of substantial trainings on climate change at the local level, which make them unequipped with knowledge and practices on local change. Basically, also the lack of personnel. In our country, one development worker is in charge to do agricultural and extension work for the community. Therefore, they do not have enough time to learn climate change. Next is the organization's failure, sometimes to identify the right blend of participants to participate in trainings. Next slide, please. What are our initiatives to address education and capacity building? As a developing country, the Philippines is proactive to address climate change concern because 75% of our population are into the agricultural sector. We have the government issued the Climate Change Act of 2009, which aims to integrate the concepts of climate change in the policy formulation and development plans of all government agencies and units to prepare the government for the impact of climate change. We also created another sector, which is the Philippine Climate Commission, which oversees all climate activities and programs and its implementation. And we created the Interagency Committee of Public Change to coordinate climate change activities. And the last one is we craft the National Action Plan on Climate Change, which integrates climate change concerns and adaptation and mitigation measures in response to government's plans and programs. Next slide. Because what we need to do right now, together we can make a difference. Because investing in climate change, education, and capacity building requires huge resources, there is a need that governments, together with the private sector and communities, should and must allocate resources for this purpose. Increase the level of public awareness of communities of the different climate conditions, such as sea surge, tsunamis, severe floods, and the like, by developing learning packages that would include approaches and methodologies that are appropriate to the needs of the communities and governments. Conduct capacity building trainings that would enhance the capacities and skills of the communities to plan, organize, and manage their communities in order to support the efforts of governments to address climate change effectively to lessen its impacts. Lastly, strengthen the local international support of governments in establishing a reliable information system that move information from top to bottom and vice versa. Next slide. Build and forge partnerships among the different stakeholders, both in the domestic and international levels, because they are important contributors to accelerate capacity building and learning. We should learn from their best practices. Mentoring, coaching, and hand-holding among the locals will enable them to learn from experts and gain practical skills that are relevant and appropriate to their needs. This we are doing in our farming communities, and this has proven to be effective. And lastly, mainstreaming climate change agenda in school curriculum. And most importantly, integrating climate change programs and projects in the development plans and work and financial plans of local government to ensure its funding and implementation. Next slide. Develop climate change champions where people can really participate and people can lead. And because climate change is not only the business of the government, but a shared responsibility, there should be an in-depth collaboration, coordination, and consultation among stakeholders, both in domestic and international communities. And we are starting now, especially on the COP. More importantly, craft local plans which will spell out the policies and strategies which the locals can call their own. Next slide. We can make it. We can make things happen. With a well-informed communities and education, policymakers are able to craft policies and intervention to heighten the resiliency of governments and communities to address climate change. Second, the academe, research and development centers and the private sector should be proactive to participate in building the technical skills of governments and communities to prepare and identify needed intervention to prevent the huge cost of impacts. And we are feeling it now, not only in the Philippines, but across the globe. It is important that the skills and capacities they develop and learn will propel them to decide their future direction and are sustainable in the long term. Next slide, please. We can make it. And at the end of the day, as citizens are better educated and capacitated, they are able to make their communities safe, resilient, and sustainable. They can use their knowledge to influence positive change on the attitudes and behaviors of people towards climate change, thus achieving quality of life with greater agricultural productivity, not only for the Philippines, but for the rest of the world, food security, and sustainable development. Together, let us make a difference in the lives of everyone. Each of us has to take part in decision making that will shape our future directions. And if we are having 10,000 listeners now, therefore, there will be 10,000 people who will start making a difference in the lives of everyone. Thank you very much and stay safe.
Thank you, Ms. Canizal, and all delegates for your inspiring ideas and presentations. Next, we would like to invite all our delegates to a panel discussion. Let's welcome Director Huang to moderate the discussion for us.
Okay, thank you. We hear that a lot of good ideas about the smart city, in each city here, and our panelists. Thank you for sharing the information you have with us. I'm going to raise 2 questions here, and actually, we have about 20 minutes left, so in no particular order. But if anyone want to jump in to give examples of how do you, actually solve the questions or give an answer to a question we have, we'd definitely like to thank you for your sharing. First question is, to build a smart city, it's not sufficient, not enough for just the government to do it. We need to involve the private sectors. So the importance is a public-private partnership. And I actually like to check with all of you or anyone want to give some examples about how do you do this PPP, public-private partnership, is to build a smart city. And anyone would like to jump in to give some examples or some ideas or some suggestion how do you do it? Maybe we'll start with CIO, CIO Dr. Liu.
Yes. And you are right, and the mechanism is very important. So the Taipei cities and the strategy is more focused on the mechanism, is not only focused on the project the performance. And so the public-private partnership is very important to us because he is a kind of innovation and the incubating and the mechanism we have. And so how can we just engage all the stakeholders and to join their effort together and to make some innovation ideas and really implement into our city. And that is very important. I truly believe that, and it's not always not enough, and if you only depend on the public sectors and the team and the resources we have, and that it can do so many things. And so we have to make this mechanism and make people to join together. And for example, in the Taipei, we build up the 3-stage innovation and the models. And the first step, and we encourage people and put their ideas and to the POC and the proof of concept and the project and the first. Then, if the evaluate is okay, prove all the concept and the technology and they used is mature enough, and we can move to the next step. We call it just that kind of the pilot, okay? The pilot stage. And if they finish the pilot stage, and they can scale up. So they can step by step to make the city and can be move forward. And for example, in recently, and we have one of the POC cases very successful, and it's about the autonomous vehicle project, as for example. And we assisted the company in realize the road test of the self-driving buses and being carried out on the exclusive bus lane on the single road. This is very busy and heavy and the traffic low and heat there. And but our major curve is there is always think about how to make and fulfill the gap and the shuttle of the in the non-peak times and for the site of the public transportations and between the eat and the livelihood. And so they want to use maybe the autonomous vehicle as one of the solution. But actually the autonomous vehicles, the project is so far is very, very beginning stage, and because they got a lot of tests on their technology and how their application, even their regulation is not easy to be figured out right now. But it still is very important to the Taipei city because we always have to incubate some really meaningful cases for the beautiful future and for the tomorrow's and the Taipei, and so we got to have this. And I think that is the case and will be build up some confidence in the autonomous vehicle technology and for the Taipei city people. So I agree with you about and we got to have some mechanism to engage all the people and to join their effort together. So.
Thank you. Is anyone want to say something? Oh, wow.
Yes, I want to say something.
Okay. Anyone? Okay, good. All right. So this Balaktash.
Yes. In Turkey, many huge investments are realized by public-private partnerships. Infrastructure projects are a good example of this. Besides, there have many city hospitals constructed by this model. And these cities are very, very useful for this COVID-19 days. And we are very happy for that, having very modern and big hospitals in this. And these buildings include smart city applications as well. Another good example is the Istanbul airport. This is a new airport, and it includes smart applications. So covering smart city applications in big investments and combining these with other facilities gain success. In urban areas, most of the facilities established in Turkey smart traffic control systems by people. This is also another best practice based on gaining revenue.
Good. Thank you. We're going to take one more input. Anyone?
Yes, if I can say one.
Sure. Just go ahead. Yes.
Just one word. Poland is maybe not typical country when we are discussing the PPP solutions, because we have very bad regulations related to PPP, and the government, local government, and the companies are not very happy to cooperate under. We don't accept the risk that is related to this regulation. So this is one thing. The second thing is, of course, we have a lot of examples that we cooperate with business at local government, but most of the projects that we have are soft projects. The hard projects, the hard infrastructure, like the airports, like the mobility solutions, like the new buses, like everything, we can quite easily get from the European Union funds. So there is a great amount of money that is allocated for Poland, and we can use as a city from that sources. The second source is the huge, also proposed by the European Union, huge program dedicated to the European countries after COVID. This is the special fund for the reconstruction of Europe. And again, a lot of money will come from that fund to the local governments. So what I think that will be ready as Poland to absorb such PPP programs in a much bigger scale in the next 10 years. I mean, close to 2030. Now there is no need to do it.
Okay, good. We may have time to take one more. Any input from anyone here about this PPP? Okay, sure. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Marcus. Ganda? Yes, please, go ahead. Mrs. Ganeta.
Okay, so in our country, our public and private partnership in terms of developing e-climate smart technology is that we have a project impact wherein the farmers are given instruments, METOS instruments. With this, the project will aims to equip the farmers with instrument, the METOS instrument, which will collect data and send this data to farmers. And from that data, the farmers are able to decide what better crops they can plant at this point in time, even there is a very strong climate change phenomenon. So we have the so-called METOS project. And it's initiated by the private sector.
Okay, that's good. Okay, thank you. We're going to move to, because time constraint, we're going to move to the second questions. In our presentation, the panelists, many of them mentioned about the data-driven, the open data, and so on. Now we know that data is a new energy for the digital era. And the cost-field data application could enhance the performance of public management. And create new business models with a view of carrying the digital governance in smart cities. How do we help establish the data economy ecosystem? Again, now this is a question, no particular order, but I'd like to invite CIO, Dr. Lee, to be to give your comment on that.
Okay. And actually, when we what we're aiming for, talking about the smart city, the data is always a very critical role to play. And I think, when we just like talk and transfer into the e-government or smart city, and we will by accumulating a vast of amount of diverse data. And I think the Taipei city government is the one of the city to implement the open data policies, and for a long time, and because it's kind of the PPP mechanism and to introduce into the data field, applications field. And so we open a lot of the data and to make the people can utilize them to analysis and synthesis them and as the layer applications. And I think the most important another way is the data is should be kind of the multiple tasks to pipeline together, and the data how to collect and how to be stored and how to be convergency, and finally how to be synthesis and analysis, and for our policy making or just decision making. And that is very important. You got to have a very solid and step-by-step and infrastructure, and it can support and lead the process and well. And another way I want to focus on is when we talking about not just about the technology issue or the process issue, and I think protect the personal information is another very important about the regulation, about the law, and the people is living in the cities is more concerned about how our government to use the layer data, and how our company or to use our data. Let's just think about the very important and the concerns about the citizen in the urban. So we have to give them more and the protection about their personal information. That is very critical to us.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Liu. I know for this data economy ecosystem, anyone like to give some comments or inputs on this? Okay, sure. Go ahead, please. Since you raise your hand, go ahead, please.
Okay. Data is very important for the smart city. You cannot make a smart city without up-to-date data and reliable data. And open data is an important aspect in our national smart city strategy and action plan in Turkey. Municipalities will develop open data portals. Data standardization is the other side of this medallion. Standardizing data adds value all the time. But standardizing geographical data adds more value. Geographical data is, I think, the most important thing in a smart city. Ability to make location-based analysis brings you to anything, to every aspect. Thus, establishing a data economy ecosystem needs standardization, data infrastructure, and legislation. But maybe the most important legislation is the most important thing, and it needs adoption. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Anyone? Okay. Yeah, please go ahead.
I also have to agree with that statement that data is the future of the ecosystem development, but I would like to divide the problem into two elements. The first one, how to collect, how to integrate, and how to open the data at the city level. And we have the solutions to do it. We, as a city, we are opening data in the field of spatial planning, in the field of the social things. Every year we are opening more and more data. Of course, the challenge is that when we are talking about the city, the challenge is now to integrate the data, to collect the data from the separated units of the city. I'm talking about the also reluctancy of the selected staff to share with the data. But this is the in-house problem. This is the in-house problem, and we have to deal with that problem. The second challenge, and I think this is the the biggest challenge for the next 5, 7, maybe 10 years is to build the system of collecting data from the stakeholders. And I'm not talking about the stakeholders that are closely related with the city, like the municipality companies, like the schools, like the other institutions that are under the umbrella of the city. I'm talking about the collecting data from our business partners, like from the companies, like from the universities, like from the NGOs, etc., etc. And this is the future of the data ecosystem from my perspective, because if we want to properly coordinate the city ecosystem, we need all data from everybody. And we as a city, we started this project many years ago. We collect data from the companies from the priority sectors of Lublin. And these data are not provided by the Central Statistical Office in Poland because they are not collecting this. So we have to do this like a city. We also collect data from the universities, we collect data from NGOs, from our startup. And from me, such comprehensive data ecosystem is covering all kinds of data. And this is the challenge, believe me.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sagan. Because I cannot see all of you, so I think the protocol is if you like to say something, raise your hand and start talking. That should be able to get attention. Anyone want to input to this question? Anyone? Going once? Okay, this is the PPP. When we talk about PPP, we talk about the data economy. These are two important definite issues for the smart city going forward. So that we hear a lot of good ideas about how this each of the people here at in each city are trying to build how you build, and also the focus of the overview of your smart city development. Again, thanks again for all of you to participating in this panel, and definitely we get a lot of good information and information sharing in this panel. Thank you again. I'd like to see the
Thank you, Director Huang, for moderating the discussion. And our most grateful appreciation goes to all the delegates for participating in our final session of CTalk. We appreciate your support and look forward to seeing you at next year's Smart City Summit and Expo. For more information about our exciting activities and forums, please stay tuned to our website. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.